So, what we're going to do today is have a look at lots of games and activities. Because I don't know if it's only me. Please tell me that it's not only me. That whenever I play a game in my private life with friends and family, I immediately try to think of how can I use this for the student, and how can I turn this into a learning activity, which drives everyone around me mad. But I think that's how it works for many of us. So I've brought you lots of traditional non-teaching games that I have managed to turn into teaching games. And let's see if they would work for you and your students as well. I'm going to show you a screen with lots of games on it. And we're going to play a game. I'd like you to try to recognize as many as you can from the images and put them in the chat. A couple of people are saying me too. Fantastic. Okay, ready? So whenever you see a game that you recognize, feel free to type it in the chat.
There are lots here that I recognise, but there are some that I don't recognise. So I'm happy that you're going to share these with us as well.
We have tic-tac-toe, crossword, bingo, story cubes, Dixit. Nobody seems to know this one.
Oh,
Right?
this is quite a British game, though. It was a British game in the 80s when I was young. It's called Blockbuster, right?
Yes.
Chris is obviously of my era.
All right. Okay. Well,
Yes.
you've recognized most of them. So let's see how we could use them in classes. So the first one here was taboo, right? So this is a very easy game to play, right? Basically, what we have here is a word at the top of the card, and then a couple of taboo words that you shouldn't be saying when you're explaining the word. There are lots of ways you can play this game. If you're teaching groups, it can be a lot of fun because you can get one group to list the words and then pass it on to the other one digitally. But even in one-to-one, you could be creating these cards. Or something that I have done before with my one-to-one students is that we created the taboo cards weeks before when we would play them, and then we took them out and played with them. So it's an easy game. There are lots of taboo generators online and taboo cards online as well that you can find. And what I like about this game is that it really mirrors real life, because I can see, with my Spanish that I would say I'm a strong B2, but it often happens that I go to a shop and I want to buy something and I just don't know the word that I want to be using. So I have to explain it. But even in the explanation, there are a couple of words that I don't know. So I have to, kind of use circumlocution to go around those words as well. And that's a very useful skill because it happens in real life all the time. So these taboo words might be something that you just don't remember, and then you will have to find a way to explain them. Also, it can be used for grammar items, to do, for example, defining and non-defining relative clauses, things like this is an object which, or it's a person who. And it can be done with very basic vocabulary like here, but also high level vocabulary. So it's highly adaptable.
Really good for practicing paraphrasing, which is interesting to make your students' speech and writing more interesting, more complex.
Another thing that I've noticed with this game, which is very interesting, because on Preply, one of the things that I really love is that you get students from all around the world, right? And some students' way of thinking, just because they are from a completely different cultural background, is very different from mine. And I think it's a good opportunity for them to see, okay, if I explain this word this way, the other person might not get it because they don't get these associations and things like that. So it's a great opportunity for this intercultural awareness training as well. The next game is bingo. So this is a simple one. I often play it with kids, for example. And what I would do is I would copy this onto the Preply whiteboard, because you remember the Preply whiteboard is interactive. So both you and your students can draw on it and highlight things. So I would call out the fruits that we have here. This is for a children's class. And then they will have to cross them off. And then when they have a line horizontally or vertically or diagonally, then they shout bingo, and then they get confetti in the classroom and we all win. Now, this is very simple, but I wonder, can you think of any ways to make it more difficult for higher level students? Let's say it's a business English student or business language student who is 45 and C1. what would you do? How could we change this game?
I like to play bingo with opposites.
Hmm.
So, I mean, here we've got some fruit, but maybe maybe I've got some adjectives that I'm going to put the opposites in, or maybe I'm going to use some verbs. Maybe for an advanced student, I might put the lemma of the word, I might put the root of the word and ask them to make, for example, the noun or the adjective or the adverb. I might try to make them make it opposite with suffixes. There's
Mm.
lots of things that I could do. And then also either when they hear the word or they hear the opposite of the word, there's a lot of process going on there. And then I want them to use it in a sentence before they can get their stamp.
I love that. I love that. Especially the one about synonyms or antonyms, right? Because oftentimes when you teach a higher level student, there's only nuance differences between words. And if you put similar words on the board and you have to find the one that really means a certain thing, that's a great challenge for higher level students. Lots of ideas here. You could use business phrases in each square and the student has to cross them out. They can find homophones, use more advanced vocabulary, expressions, even grammar. It could be for example, in English, the three forms of the verb, right? The second form and the third form, or prepositions, or all kinds of things that we've mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Amelie has just put a French idea there about conjugation. So I'm going to add that to the course for sure, but this is very useful for French tutors. Thank you. So, this is what I'm trying to show you here, that whatever game you see, it's highly likely that you will be able to turn it into a teaching activity with very little tweaks. This took me 2 minutes because I did a Google search for bingo fruits. But of course, a bingo board, just to draw it on the board, is going to take a minute. And even the words that go on the board can come from your student, because remember, we want them to be more autonomous. We want them to personalize the learning material. So there's little preparation needed from your part. Now, the next game is Palmanism, which again seems very simple because it's basically, the words here, and then you have to turn them over and find the pairs. On the whiteboard, what I would normally do is cover them with little squares. Well, only one square, and of course, copy paste them because that would take ages. So, I just draw one square, copy paste it, cover them, and then the student will be able to move them, peep under the card, and then see what's there and find a pair. But then again, it seems a little simple, right? It's great for elementary learners, but I think we can challenge our students more here. So let's think about this together. How could we make more of this activity? Elizabeth is saying pre-teaching vocabulary to context of this. Scramble the letters. I love that. Okay, that's already an added challenge, even for lower level learners. It's nice, especially if they use a different alphabet, then spelling might be something you really want to focus on. Present, past, and future match. Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of putting, I like this one from Pontus, that says pairs could be done with the preposition that go with a verb. Really nice. I like the idea of perhaps even using the word and the definition.
Yeah.
Or maybe making a sentence that's one of my students' sentences that they've made with a gap in it, and then the other side of the Pelmanism is the word, so they have to match that gapped sentence. And again, if we can get our students to write those sentences themselves, there's that emotional connect, and then they're doing this repetition with the game.
Exactly. Yeah. Another thing you can do is just adding something to the process is that, let's say I uncover the bed here. Before uncovering another card, I would have to say what I can see and make a sentence with it. And then let's say this is the next one I look at. Here I have to pronounce it correctly and make a sentence with it. But it has to be a different sentence. So if it's bad and bad, then it will have to be a new one. So every time I'm forced to create my own sentences. And I really like this because there's a lot of repetition built into it. There's creativity because I'm kind of forced to come up with new sentences. And this can easily take up 20 minutes of your class, but in a meaningful way, and a meaningful way of repeating these pieces of vocabulary.
I like the suggestion from Marcella saying describe an apartment using the word. So as an extension to this activity, we could play the game, and then I could ask my student to either orally describe the room or whatever the context is, or even write me a description of their room, for example, so I can extend this activity.
Exactly. Marco is asking about how you can make these exercises yourself. I just looked for pictures and put boxes there, you know. So what I did on the Preply whiteboard, I drew a grid and then just copied pictures there and added words. But then again, this can be done for with your student as well. All you need to do is do a little bit of user training, because I often hear tutors saying that they use the whiteboard but their students don't, and it's just a wasted opportunity, I feel like, because we know for a fact that the more ownership the student has over the material, what's happening in the classroom, the more likely they are going to remember. So teach them how to use the whiteboard, and this will really help you and the student. Marco, I just used the Preply whiteboard. I didn't use any extra app for this.
And Anita, I have a question. Because there is a course in the Preply Academy about the whiteboard, isn't there? Is there an activity in that course about how to do this kind of activity?
Exactly. Yes. So when you're here, if you click on professional development, recordings and courses, look for interactive. That will be the one. Yes. And it says interactive tasks using the Preply whiteboard. And in this course, we go through the functions of the whiteboard. And for each function, for example, image adding or drawing, I show you an activity and how you can actually do it. So I click around on the whiteboard and show you how it could be done. Lots of people have already said that they liked it. So this is the one I would check out, interactive tasks using the Preply whiteboard. Let me show you the next game. Many of you have recognized this one as well. It's the snakes and ladders game. Then again, this one required a minute of preparation because I just Googled snakes and ladders, copied this board and put it on the Preply whiteboard. So what this game does is, it's quite simple. I'm sure many of you have played it. You roll a dice. There are lots of online pieces of dice that you can use, and you walk on the squares. And then whenever you land on a ladder, you can go up. Or if it's ahead of a snake, then you will have to slide down the snake. Question here: how can we turn this into a vocabulary revision activity? Because so far there's not much language use happening. Put words in each box, Natalie says. Good idea. Yeah. So you land on a square and then you have to make a sentence with the word there, or maybe explain the word, or give the opposite of the word, depending on how challenging you want to make this task. There's a question for each question. Oh, so like each box will have a question. I
like the idea of having a list, a numbered list of vocabulary that you can then say whenever you land on 15, you have to do something with that piece of vocabulary. And then that each of your vocabulary sets, you can play this game, you know how to play this game, and you can do it with different vocabulary sets. You could even say, okay, I'm going to choose a number and I'm going to choose my vocabulary from my sports vocabulary. Or next time you land on a number, choose it from your food vocabulary, or whatever, if you have different sets with numbered vocabulary lists.
You can also play around with the colors if you're using a colorful one. Let's say if you land on a red square, you have to make a sentence in the past, or on a green one, you have to make a conditional sentence. So you can make it more difficult there as well. The way I usually play it, we walk around, and then whenever my student lands on a square, I give a word to them from our list, because I have our Preply vocabulary. So I can go back whenever I want to like earlier words as well. And they have to make a sentence. If it's correct, if it's grammatically correct and it's using the word the correct way, then they stay there. If they don't, then they have to walk back to wherever they came from. And of course, in order to go up the ladder, they might have to do something more complicated. The problem here, and I often encounter this when we're playing, it's a one-to-one class, because in groups it's easier, right? Because they can just play together. But in a one-to-one class, if I'm playing against my student, it's very likely that I will win, right? Because my language skills are better. And it's just unfair, and it doesn't really feel nice. So what I do here, I try to add a spin to it, is that when it's my turn and I land on a square, my student gives me a word to make a sentence with it. My sentence has to be true about my student. So let's say Carrie is my student and my word is coffee. I would say, I think, Carrie, you have 2 coffees a day and you usually drink a cappuccino. True or false?
False. I'm English. I'm a tea drinker.
Perfect. So this would mean I would have to go back, right, to wherever I came from. This is very memorable, right? We're talking, everybody just loves talking about themselves, right? So this is going to make the sentence memorable. It's going to build rapport between me and my student. And it also gives the element of competition or the element of luck to the game. So it's true for all the games that we're showing today. If you're joining, always try to create this mini information gap between you. And this has always worked very well for me, this true or false. And it can lead to a nice conversation, and that again is useful conversation practice for my student. And we can talk about what kind of teas Carrie likes, or why I wouldn't drink tea and why I would drink coffee instead, and that can start a whole conversation. Any questions in the chat that we should be answering?
No, there was a nice suggestion of they have to repeat the number of vocabulary items as the number of the square. So by the time you get to 30, you have to list 30 vocabulary items.
Wow.
It's a challenge.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And remember, you might have very low level students, and even just saying the number will be useful for them. So it will depend really on the level of the student and how much you want to make them struggle and how much you want to challenge them here. Here's the next game. It's notes and crosses. Here I just created a little video of how I did it on the Preply whiteboard. Oh, sorry, this is still about the snakes and ladders one, right? So I just added it, and then you will be able to move it around. And remember, all the functionality that you have, your student has to, so they will be able to draw. And I usually add the little shape, and that will be our counter that we move around. And as I said, notes and crosses works the same way, right? So you can only put your note or cross if you are able to say the word or create a sentence with it. I can only put mine if my sentence is true about you. So again, you can build this element of competition or element of luck into it. And there's nothing more simple than creating notes and crosses on the Preply whiteboard. Mine is not even pretty, and it doesn't have to be, right? But it's all about creating something on the spot. And if you want to, you can also put the words into the squares here, so the student can choose the word that they want to look at. Because it often happens that, especially with busy adults, they come to class, they didn't have time to prepare or to learn all the vocabulary, but they might have some words that they know already. And then I will be the one making the sentences with the ones they didn't know, which of course, I will be in a more favorable position to win, but that's not the point here. It's more about them repeating these words and coming back to these words. Something I did here, I put the words here, and then they had to put the notes and crosses there. But then I deleted a couple of words, and then students had to go back at the end of the lesson and try to remember what the words were, or try to remember the sentences. So again, you can build this repetition into the class itself. And now here comes Blockbusters. Have you ever played this game, Carrie, in class?
Yes. In a group class, yes. In one-to-one classes, I haven't, but I imagine it would be an easy one to adapt, right?
How do you play it with group classes?
We have one team, and traditionally the game was you had two teams, and one team went from one side to the other, from left to right, and the other side went down from the top to the bottom, and they had to connect from one side to the other. And again, traditionally, the idea is that each of those hexagons has a letter in it, and you have to answer a question about a word beginning with that letter. But again, as we've adapted bingo and noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe, you could add anything into these cells that you want your student to manipulate and do whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So you would be adding the words here. And this is exactly the point, right? So when you get this right, let's say I'm the red team. If I get this right, I'll get this curve. And then I want to go this way, reach the other end. But then, of course, the blue team, my student, is coming from the other end, and they're trying to block me. For example, if they block this one, I won't be able to move here. In groups, what I do is that I put the first letter of the word, and I give out the words to the students, and they have to write the definition. So there is zero preparation happening from my part, except that I have to think of the words. So in groups, I would get one of the students, like I would give words to each student and they come up with the definitions. And then, of course, in that round, they cannot play. In one-to-one classes, again, this is a little bit changed, right? So we will have to come up with the definitions, or we will have to say the sentences. So normally I would just put this on the whiteboard, and I would get my student to look at the list of words from the last couple of lessons and put the 10 most difficult ones on the squares here. And I'll do the same with the things that I think are difficult. And then we do these together. So we create the board together. And again, this adds a little bit of playfulness. And again, if there's a word that the student doesn't remember, I can be choosing that one, and then we can play around with this.
Megan's right had put a nice note to say this is really great for pronunciation as well, particularly when you're thinking about difficult words to pronounce or words that sound similar that are a little bit different. You could put those words in just the act of pronouncing that sentence. But again, put it into a sentence, make it true for yourself. Helps that emotional connect.
Exactly. Yeah. I've seen it a lot used for pronunciation. You put like sit, seat, and hit, for example, and you have to find your way around the words that have a similar pronunciation. So you wouldn't go this way, right? Because it's a different vowel sound. You would go this way, and then you will have to reach the end of the board. Yeah, it's a great idea, Megan. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth, is this game on Preply? It will be if you copy it to the whiteboard. So basically, all of the things that you see today, I will put the images into the Preply Academy course, so you can easily just copy them and put them on the whiteboard, and then you will be able to add these words to them. Here's the next game, Story Cubes. A couple of you have mentioned that you like them, and I absolutely love Story Cubes. I think they are creative, fun, engaging, and it really help the students come up with these memory hooks that we mentioned before, things that they will use to remember the words. So the way I use Story Cubes for vocabulary revision, because you can use them for many things, by the way. Some people use it for storytelling, for creating, different storylines, creating different sentences, for example, in the past. The way I use it for vocab revision is that I would choose a word from our list. Let's say you're a high-level student. Carrie, can you be my student? We can do this game with you.
Yes.
Let's say you're my high-level student, and we've just learned the word conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
And you roll the dice, and you get a B. Your task is to put these two things into one sentence. There's one rule. It can't be a baby sentence like the bees have a conspiracy theory, right? But it has to be a longer compound sentence.
And okay, yes. So there is a conspiracy theory that bees are being replaced by drones in order to pollinate plants to make honey.
Amazing. Very good. So have you seen what happened here? She did not only use her creativity, also connecting the ideas, but she also used in order to, so this like grammatical structure as well, and are being replaced. So that's again like a complex structure. So this can be easily, people are clapping for you.
Thank
I
you.
think it was an amazing sentence. Good job. I don't think I would have been able to come up with this. And what I found is super interesting, that oftentimes the students I thought would be the least creative, they come up with the most amazing sentences, because the words that we choose are relevant for them. They are from their list of words. It might be business vocabulary or something specific for their area of expertise. And then we match them up with something silly like a bee or a keyhole or something like that. And it's amazing what kind of things they come up with.
That taps into, so when I was thinking of that sentence, I was imagining, I remember a TV program, it was a series I was watching that was talking about bees being replaced by drones, which I could picture in my brain. And so again, and I really liked that, so there was a positive emotion there. So there was lots of those visualization, emotion connect, lots of that, all of that going on.
And it's definitely something I'm going to remember. So, next time we talk about these or conspiracy theories, we can come back to this. I can get you to talk about this article, and then you do a lot of speaking practice as well. Something I like to do at the end of the lesson or in the next lesson or later on is to bring just a picture back and ask my student whether they remember what the word was. And that again, we're creating our own little story. So it also builds rapport between the student and the tutor, but it also acts as a memory hook. So I'm sure you will remember conspiracy theory when you see a bee next time. There is a digital version for it as well. I think it's here. Yes. So if you don't have your own story cubes, there is Story Dice online. I'm going to add the link to the course as well, and you will be able to find them there. And it basically generates the dice, and you will be able to share your screen and do this with your student, or they can do the clicking and they can share their screens, which again I prefer because of learner autonomy training, and they will be the ones choosing which card they want to use. And the same thing goes for Dixit, by the way. You can easily just turn it into an activity by adding the cards here and then getting the students to use them as memory hooks. All right. So these are the games that we've looked at. I have one more game to show you before we move on to Preply Tools, which is Word Blurt. So this game is from the Jimmy Fallon show, because again, when I watch TV, I try to think of how these can be used for teaching activities. And Jimmy Fallon, if you don't know him, he invites celebrities to his shows and he basically plays games with them. And this is one of the games that I have started using in my lessons too. So I just want you to watch this short video and tell me, do you see this happening in a classroom?
Here's how it works. We have this deck of cards right here, and written on each card is a random word, which neither of us have seen before. Okay? I'm going to flip it over, and then we both have to say the first thing that pops into our heads. All right? We'll find out how much we think alike, because I think that we're... So let's do this here. Can we put the word up on the screen so only the audience can see it? Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
One, 2, 3. Drunk.
Shot.
All right, I get it. So shot, drunk. Okay, I went to the...
We were really obvious about that, but...
Toast.
Belly?
Belly?
Oh, like...
Marshmallow belly?
Yeah, girl. I just, what's in front of me? I just, state the obvious.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Huh?
Sorry.
Joanna seems to like it. Jimmy Fallon, yes, he's the one. So you see the rules, right? You basically show a word to your student, and then both of you have to say the first thing that pops to your mind. And then you talk about why you thought of this word, and you can have a conversation about this. Again, it shows a lot about how your student is thinking. It's a very interesting insight into their brains, and there's zero preparation required for this activity. How do you like this one, Carrie? Would you like to use this in your classes?
I love this. I mean, I play this game with my friends.
Have you?
Yes. And it's also fun to play the opposite, that you have to, first of all, you have to think of a word that's associated with that word. And then you have to think of a word that's nothing to do with that word. And if the other person can find some connection, then you don't win the point. But if you can find something that's completely nothing, and again, the cognitive processes that are going on trying to find things, because your instinct is to find the closest thing.
Interesting. I love that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Play the opposite.
Yeah. And then again, it opens the conversation, right? Because then I can say, I think that has to do with that word. And then the more cognitively we get involved and the more reasoning and debating that happens around the word, the more likely that we will remember this. Yeah. Very simple game, nothing to prepare. It's a good idea to show this video maybe to show how the game works, but you can easily just explain how the game works to your students. The only advice here that I would give you is that before you count to 3, I usually count to 3 when we say, okay, here's the word, 1, 2, 3, let's say the word that we think of. Before I do that, I always check whether my student actually knows the word, because there's no point in coming up with an incorrect association and then getting tangled up in your thoughts and repeating the incorrect thing. It's not a test, right? It's for us to be able to use the word correctly. So we quickly just check whether the student remembers the word. then we say our associations with it, and then we have this conversation. It's a very simple game to play.